What if there were no more sponsored BMX riders? And look, I understand that there's a whole bunch of you that probably clicked on this right now, super upset and enraged at even the thought of that question. And to all of you people who are upset and enraged already, just hear me out. Because I am not here to say that that should ever happen, that it ever will happen, or even that it ever could happen. This is purely a thought experiment. I also want to start this out by saying that I completely understand that all of the most loved brands in BMX history, both past and its present, as well as its future, have all been shaped by its riders. Look at Cult BMX right now, shaped by its riders and one of the most loved BMX brands in all of BMX today. That is the case for all of them. But even so, I'm still having this thought experiment because I want to go through this process and see what this might look like. And I wanted to add this in here real quick to make it very clear that I fully understand that none of the brands that exist right now would be what they are without their riders. But that doesn't mean that we can't make the case and look at what it might be like if one day all of a sudden no more riders. Yes, we wouldn't have the same influences to the companies and creative outlets, but we're going to see in this video how the practical aspects and business aspects of this and the actual effect that it might have might be surprising to some, and to others is probably expected. And to some of you watching, it might be a reality check. So all of the things that we love about the brands that we love in BMX, yeah, they do mostly come from the riders. But the business side of things, just like a lot of other industries, might not come from the riders. So let's continue. I am here to conduct this thought experiment with myself because I'm here just basically doing a monologue, talking to myself about this, but I have thought this through and I don't want to act like any of this should ever happen. I'll say it again because I know there's people out there that need to hear it 8 times before they actually get it. But when you think about some of the implications that the title of this video would have, it really does make you wonder. And it made me wonder, and I thought deep into this, and I have lots of notes to cover about this topic, and I get it. I get that people would be mad about this because BMX is something that we are all passionate about. For some of us, it's our livelihood, and to have that be threatened by even asking this question, that's a scary thought. But what I propose is that you use that thought and you use this question being asked and all of the concepts that I talk about here as ammunition to make yourself so valuable that it's not even possible for you to be out unless something drastic were to happen. Because we just saw 2 companies that had incredible BMX teams, Free Agent and GT. Absolutely some of the best riders in the entire world dropped instantly like that. No matter how valuable they made themselves or how much they did, they were dropped just like that because of whatever factors that were out of their control, out of the team manager's control, and out of anybody who's directly involved's control, because sometimes that just happens. And if you want to make sure that when that does happen, you're able to find something else, well, then these are the kinds of things that you need to think about. And if you're just bobbing along, having a dandy time, doing nothing, just riding your bike, and it's working out for you, congratulations, because you're one of very, very few who are that good and also sell product without putting any effort into anything other than riding. So, once again, I am going to repeat, I do not want this to happen. I don't think it ever could happen. I don't think it ever will happen. But I want to conduct a thought experiment to go through these things, and I am a firm believer that luck favors the prepared one, and if you prepare yourself mentally and think about all possibilities, that you will already be that far ahead of anyone who hasn't thought at all about these types of things. So I'll start it out by saying, there's a couple different ways that we could approach this subject. And how does that even happen? How do all of the sponsored riders just not be sponsored anymore? Is this a BMX where there never were sponsored riders, or is it the current BMX and everyone just gets dropped tomorrow? I'm going to go ahead and say that I would assume in this thought experiment that everyone gets dropped tomorrow, and it would be very similar eventually to what would have happened if there were never sponsored riders in the first place. So what I'm going to start also by saying is if there were no more sponsored BMX riders, there would still be companies. This is a subject that came up because I saw a bunch of people in that crazy storm of a post that I made on Instagram the other day that were saying that companies are nothing without the riders, and without riders, companies don't exist, or whatever like that. And to a certain extent, you're absolutely right. But what you have to consider, you don't have to, you could just ignore all of this. But what you could consider, if you're reasonable and open-minded, is that people have to buy bikes and parts if they want to ride, no matter what. If there's no sponsored riders, guess what? There's still way more people out there who just ride for fun and just go out there and enjoy their time on their bike, who are going to keep doing that need parts, and they need bikes, and they need this stuff to exist in order to continue doing that. So while there may be less of an influence from a specific person who works for a company on those people to make those purchasing decisions, well, they're still going to need to do it. And they're still going to make those decisions somehow. And that's what I'm here thinking about. So companies can never fully go away. And even if they did, let's go so far as to say that the entire BMX industry goes from where it is today, where there's a bunch of companies making parts, and then tomorrow there's nothing. Well, guess what? People are still going to need bikes. So real quick, companies are going to form. It's going to be people who know how to weld and have the know-how to build a BMX frame and bike and these things, who then start up making these things, and then people are going to come to them and they're going to need them, just like how companies organically start today. Someone has the skills and makes something, and then people want that something, and then enough people find out about it and want it that person can come to a conclusion that, well, maybe I should make more of these and then sell them. And then all of a sudden now it's a company. So even if all of the companies went away and all of the sponsored riders went away, as soon as people start breaking bikes, companies are going to exist again because people need bikes to ride BMX. It's pretty simple. You cannot have a rider without a bike. People talk about chicken or egg conversation. It's similar, but it's not similar, because in order for someone to ride that bike, a bike has to exist. So we've also seen companies exist where there was no team. There were no sponsored riders. We've seen these companies exist already. So this model where there's no sponsored riders of BMX has already existed in certain brands. Yeah, they've all sucked. None of them have helped BMX in any way. Maybe, I can't say that blanket statement. Maybe they have. But most of them sucked. Most of them were a product of COVID, where there were bikes, just you couldn't keep them on the shelves in bike shops or stores or online or anywhere. And a lot of these bikes sucked, and most of them still do suck for the companies that are still around. And they don't have a team and they don't support a team. But imagine if a company came around that actually knew what they were doing in the BMX world and made a bike that didn't suck, made parts that didn't suck, and they didn't have a team, and they put this stuff out there. Like, people would buy it. It would happen. it wouldn't be the cool thing to do and it wouldn't be accepted by any means. And I'm not saying this should happen. Realize throughout this video, for all of you that I still need to repeat it to, I'm not saying this stuff should happen. I'm just thinking about what if it did? What would that look like? And so people would buy these things. And if they were good, people would find out about it. And more people would buy them. And normal people would buy these things because they're seeing them online. They're seeing them in practical advertising methods that BMX currently does not implement. People would buy them. It would happen. And normal people, like, it would be frowned upon in the actual BMX world because us as riders know that these companies aren't supporting a team. They're not supporting BMX. And we know that that's kind of a crappy thing to support by buying these bikes. But normal people don't know that. Normal people can't know that until they're into the BMX ecosystem. So they're going to buy these bikes if that type of company existed. And where that leads my brain to think is like, well, if that existed and it was a good bike and people found out about it and more people started to buy it, well, think about if there were no more sponsored riders, how that's what the BMX industry would kind of morph into. It would be it would be a more objective based purchase for people because people would buy these parts and bikes and frames from companies who were inferior and they would break them. And then that word would spread and people would stop buying them. So it would force the companies to either make better stuff or just leave entirely. And that is probably what might happen if all sponsored riders went away. It would be a more honest and objective purchasing process for people because you wouldn't have two sides talking, because right now it still does exist. There are companies out there who make an inferior product, and when people buy them and break it, it gets talked about. People break good stuff and it gets talked about, but there's enough out there. There's enough out there for people to objectively look at those situations and realize that, okay, maybe that's because of a defect that happened 1 in 1,000, or maybe it was a freak accident or whatever that might be. And you would see more people objectively looking at it. And if a whole bunch of people are breaking this thing because there's no riders, sponsored riders out there who are helping influence people's purchasing decisions because they just ride for that company and person wants to buy it because of that. If they're just buying it because they have to buy something to be able to ride, then they find out that it's inferior, then everybody's going to find out because more people are going to have that happen and they're going to stop buying it. And they're not going to have sponsored riders out there with this inferior product saying it's the best thing ever and people actually listening and believing and buying it and then breaking it and then being like, well, what the heck? Now I don't trust the rider. Or earlier in that process, you have this conflicting thing where I've heard from these people that bought it that it sucks, but the rider rides it and I'm a fan and they say it's the best thing ever. Well, maybe I'll try it. Well, it's going to weed that out very quickly because that can't exist when you don't have both of those sides on opposite ends talking to the people in the middle trying to make a purchasing decision. And in some respects, I think that could be a good thing. I think we need more transparency of things because it forces people and companies to be better. It forces these companies, like I just said, to either be better or go away. And that's real. And that's part of this thought experiment. So it's one of those things like I absolutely do not think that sponsored riders should go away at all. But I can see how if you are going to have a more objective purchasing process, that could be a good thing. And maybe we need a more objective purchasing process in BMX. And I think that that does happen more often than we see because the people who are buying this stuff aren't as vocal on the internet and vocal in general. Like about their purchasing. They make their decisions and they make their voice heard with their money. And when something breaks, they don't need to go out and talk about it all over the internet. They just buy something else. So it already happens. There's just noise there. And so basically they're going to buy also like people. So it's going to create an environment similar to the company thing that I said, where people are going to need bikes. So companies are going to form very quickly. There's still going to be riders who are really, really good at riding bikes. They're just going to have to buy their stuff if there's no sponsored riders anymore. And those people are going to want to buy the best. So they're going to buy the best stuff. And then you see a similar effect to being a sponsored rider in that, okay, if I'm looking to get into BMX or I'm new and I'm just starting and I break something or it's time to buy a new frame, who do I see out there who's really good riding? And what are they riding? No sponsored rider involved, but that person who's good and their purchasing decision and what they choose to ride could influence someone else's. And that actually happens all the time as well. We just don't exactly think about it or see it in the same way. So it's another thing. It creates an independent avenue of things that already exists in BMX today, but would be forced to exist. It's very interesting because, and I already talked about the whole process of it being more objective, but it creates a more honest process for these things because there are dishonest riders out there who they're saying what they have to say to be able to keep their position with a company. It's real, and I get it. You see it all the time. People who've been in BMX forever, they know it when they see it, but it's real. It happens. And so what this leads me to saying is that just like the companies and just like really good riders and them out there influencing other people's decisions without even realizing it because they want something good that can hold up, that's what they're going to buy because they have to. What that leads me to is that even if all sponsored riders went away tomorrow, BMX community and culture is always going to exist. It always has, and it always will. Even when BMX is at its lowest points, BMX culture and community is what has helped bring it back out of the depths. People who want to celebrate that culture and community help bring it out of the depths. And it's always going to be there. You do not need riders to have a jam. People have independent local jams all the time. You don't need sponsored riders for that. And if I'm being completely honest, a lot of the times with those jams, when you see them, the sponsored local riders don't even go. So it's like, this is what I'm talking about with all this stuff in riders realizing that they need to be a valuable asset to a company. And how do you do that? If somebody has a local jam and you're close to there, you should probably go because that's going to make people stoked on you and the companies that you ride for. But we see riders who don't even make those connections. It's something that doesn't require any effort on your part. And there was a lot of people on my post talking about how riders go out there and kill themselves and that should be worth something. Well, guess what? Riders go out there and kill themselves for free all the time because there's riders out there who are at the level of pros who don't ride for companies that just want to push themselves or just want to make awesome videos or just do crazy stuff because it's in their head and they want to do it and they're compelled to. That happens all the time for free. BMX riders don't do that because they're paid to as much as they do that because it's their passion and that is what they live for. And yes, that should be worth something to a company, but it doesn't entitle people to just get something without giving it back in some way. That's not the way business works. And I have an entire video that will be coming about this subject. But what I'm getting at is that no matter what happens, if there's sponsored riders, if there's not, if there's 10,000 companies or no companies, bike shops or no bike shops, or anything else in no industry whatsoever, and everyone makes their own frame, community and culture of BMX will always exist. People will always come together to ride their bikes with each other and have fun, because that is the heart of BMX, and that is what we do. That is what we enjoy. There are some people who do like to go out and ride by themselves, and that's their thing. But the vast majority of people like to ride with others, and that is never going to stop. And so realistically, like, people are always they're gonna get together and ride. They're gonna have events. They're gonna hold jams. They're gonna do everything else that we love in BMX, regardless of if there's a sponsored rider or not. It's just gonna happen because it already does from so many people who are not supported sponsored riders. And my question is it possible that one day we get to a place where, through a different number of factors, we reach a point where the value of a sponsored rider is less than what they're bringing in, and companies realize that, and, well, hey, you're not moving the needle, man. Like, we as a company, we have to make money to survive, and if you're not moving that needle, then we got to find someone who will. And if no one moves that needle, because we've gone into a mindset of, I shouldn't have to do anything other than ride my bike, and it's the company's job to market me. That is the most backwards thinking that there could ever be. What I'm proving right now and what I'm saying right now and all of these things show that the company doesn't need the rider as much, a sponsored rider, as much as someone who wants to ride BMX for a living needs the company. And it's that simple. You can get mad at me as much as you want, but if you understand that concept, you probably aren't in my comments or aren't in your group chats bitching about what I'm saying and what people that I'm having on podcasts are saying. You're probably the people who are out there already. I'm not going to name names because I don't want to single people out or anything like that, even if it's positive. You're probably someone who's already out there riding as hard as you can, helping facilitate your own videos. You're probably filming other people who are on the team with you. You're probably hosting local jams and events. You're probably visiting bike shops. You're probably talking to kids, and you're probably organizing and curating your own type of media to go on your Instagram page or your YouTube channel without the company having to do all of that for you. Because if you understand these concepts already, you're probably already a valuable asset as a sponsored rider. And if you're not supported sponsored rider and you understand these concepts, then, and that's something that you want to pursue, well, then you understand how to make that happen. And I'm talking about all of these things because I understand that if more riders understand where their value comes from, and that just being willing to do some of these things that you should already want to do. If you love BMX so much that you want it to be your job and you want to get paid to do it, you should already want to do this stuff. It shouldn't have to be as much work for you. I forget where I was going with that, but what I'm trying to get at here is it all comes down to the willingness of a rider. I've heard so many times from company owners, not just, smaller companies, big company owners and team managers, that riders are asked to do things and they just can't do it. They won't do it. They don't make it happen. And like I said earlier, I have another video coming out about this exact topic, going in depth even more. But what I'm driving at with all of this is that being a professional or sponsored BMX rider is essentially having your own small business and brand that is you. And what you see out there is that when you see a successful person who's running a business or a brand, and they're in the middle of growing something, or they're pushing, trying to make this thing be the best that it can, you see them putting on whatever hat it takes to get the job done and push things forward. You don't see them acting with this attitude of, well, I shouldn't have to be marketing for this. No, they put the marketing hat on and they learn how to do it, or they push so hard that they make enough money to hire someone to do that. And BMX is not making enough money for these people who are just trying to keep the company going to do that. It's just, we're in a bad spot with BMX right now. And the more riders who are supported and sponsored, I'm trying to use the word supported in place of sponsored for anyone who hasn't caught on to that. I didn't do it very much in this video, but I am. But the more people who understand that for companies to exist and for a supported rider to continue being supported, money has to come in and product has to sell. And the more people who are willing to just pitch in on helping that happen versus just having an attitude that all I should have to do is ride my bike and a company should be sending someone to film me and putting all of this together and putting it out there and I shouldn't have to have any part of it. The more people who get that, the more valuable assets we have to companies and the better companies can do, the more they can sell, the more money they make, and the more cool things that we like in BMX can happen. Trips cost money. Making videos costs money. And you do not get a return from those things as a company. That's why they happen less. Because it costs a lot of money to send a team to another area of the country and pay for that entire period of time to make a video that is an amazing thing to watch, but is just entertainment, and it usually has copyrighted music on it, so even if it gets 1 million views, it can't bring any money back in for the company, and the company, yeah, they might be able to make a connection between when it releases and maybe a little bump in sales, but there's no real connection between the video and sales numbers other than that. It's hard to justify those things when you can't see where the money's coming from and there's not enough money coming in excess to just have those things happen. So when Joey Cobbs talks about if a rider's going to make $1,000 a month, the company has to make $120,000 $120,000 a year. If a rider's going to make $12,000 a year, the company has to make $120,000 a year at the least to be able to make that money back and have money for things like trips, product development, and everything else that has to be done to sustain a business. And it's pretty simple of a concept. And the more people that understand that, the better off riders can be because they can equip themselves with the tools necessary to put themselves ahead of the rider who doesn't want to put the work in. And people talk about riders are already fighting for pennies because they don't make enough money as it is. Well, these concepts and understanding them, and then companies understanding that they need to market to more than just BMX with the riders that they have who want to put the work in, are how we grow that pie and how companies can make more money to be able to pay riders more. And I'm also not saying that this is only on the riders. I'm not saying that the riders should be out there doing 100% of the marketer's job or the sales manager or sales team's jobs. I'm saying riders should just be willing to help put an effort towards those things so that the marketers have something to work with. Because it's expensive to send a rider across the country or to send a filmer across the country for something. And then if the marketers have something more to work with and it's easier for them to produce the stuff to work with, then the salespeople have more ammunition to reach out to people to be able to sell stuff easier. It is a full circle and everyone has to do their part. And to have an attitude that riders should only ride and that the companies should worry about everything else is how we got to where we're at now. It's not all of how, but it's part of it. And I'm not saying that it's only the rider's fault, because companies could absolutely be doing other and more things to facilitate the riders. And if there's trips that happens, I've already made the videos about shop stops and all of these things that don't really happen, that are way easier for a company to make happen and a team manager and a sales guy to make happen than it is for a rider. Yeah, a rider can organize a trip. A rider could make a video happen on their own. A rider could do all of these things, but it's way easier if the rider's willing to and the company helps facilitate it and they work together to make it happen. So what I'm trying to say, and this brings it all full circle, is that what I'm talking about is, and everything that I'm saying shows that the job of a sponsored rider is to bring more attention to the company doing the sponsoring than they would get on their own. And if we're in a place where companies could do just as good or close to as good without sponsored riders, that means companies are going to make way more money because they don't have as much overhead in paying all these riders and for trips and all of these things. If we're in a place where riders' value doesn't add up, then that's not a good thing. If it's not happening and a company isn't selling more because of that person, then they're losing money. And there's a lot of BMX companies out there right now losing money. And we're driving faster and faster to a place where this reckoning that we're in the middle of is going to get worse and worse. And there's a cleansing that's going to have to happen where we find out that the people who really do help out and really do move the needle are the ones that are sticking around. That's just the way it's going to end up being. And it's the way it's what's going to happen no matter what, because you have to get your pay. You have to earn it. It's that simple. And there's no way to get around that short of like companies who support legends because of their contributions to the company and BMX. That's something that I think absolutely should happen. And it does to an extent. I feel like it should happen even more often. But it's hard when companies don't see their money back from all of the things that they're putting money out into. And so I'll say it again for the people who like to turn off their ears. I'm not saying that sponsored riders should ever stop existing. I don't think it will happen. I don't think it ever could happen. What I'm saying is that there's a lot of riders who do an awesome job at this aspect of it. And I don't need to talk to those people because they already understand. But those are the type of people who will listen to something like this and try to find ways that they can be even more valuable assets to the companies that support them. But I think that there's also a lot of riders out there who skate by doing the absolute bare minimum, whether it's out of ignorance for the fact that they should be doing more, cockiness because they feel like they shouldn't have to do more, or laziness because they just don't want to do more. But we're in a time where that's not going to last, and it can't last. And I would absolutely hate to see BMX turn into an industry of elites and frames and jet BMXs only making better stuff because they realized that you can make this stuff and you can make it good and people are going to buy it no matter what. And they realized that they could do it without a team, and they might not sell as much stuff, but it would force everyone to make the best stuff they can. And there would be a more honest kind of process to things. I would hate to see that happen. And I really hope that through all of the stuff that I'm doing and the videos like this one and the one that I'm going to make about riders should only ride, marketers should market, and salespeople should sell. In that video, I hope that all of these things and the conversations that I have with people who are actually in this industry, actually doing it, who actually see the numbers, I hope that all of this stuff can open some people's eyes and at least make some more people think. You don't have to accept my opinions. You don't have to take action on any of this stuff. But when the reckoning fully happens and everything gets burnt down because people aren't helping as much as they're being helped, it's going to suck. And I really hope it doesn't happen. But through this thought experiment, I hope you can reasonably understand that companies don't need sponsored riders as much as sponsored riders need companies to be able to exist. BMX as a community will always happen. People will always buy bikes, whether or not people are getting paid to ride those bikes. And if you don't like these things and you're in a position of potentially being a sponsored rider, don't pursue it. And if you are a sponsored rider already and you don't like this stuff, you're going to find out you're either going to have to put in your weight or pull your weight, or you're going to be gone. And you're going to see you on Monday for work, because that's what's going to happen. So with that being said, I'm sure there's a million people yelling at me in the comments, sending this in their group chats, laughing. I'm just trying to help BMX in ways that feel so obvious to me, but feel like there's only a certain group of people who understand or pay attention to it. And I'm not going to stop talking about it. So I hope it helps. And thank you for everyone who made it this far in this. We'll see you next time for another video. Goodbye.